A millionaire CEO secretly followed his maid home. The triplet discovery left him speechless. Before we explore all the details of this incredible story, tell us where you're following us from and the time. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss a thing, and let's embark on this journey together. He had programmed his life to perfection, but forgot to code in love. The 42nd floor of the Chrysler Building never felt emptier than at 3:47 a.m. Darren Holloway stood before the floor-to-ceiling windows of his penthouse, watching Manhattan's sleepless lights flicker like dying stars. His smart home system hummed quietly, adjusting the temperature to exactly 68.4 degrees, the optimal setting his biometric sensors had calculated for peak REM sleep, yet sleep remained elusive, as it had for the past 6 months. "Good morning, Darren," his AI assistant chirped through hidden speakers. "Your cortisol levels are elevated. Shall I initiate the meditation protocol?" "No," he muttered, his breath fogging the glass. At 36, Darren had built Emoticorp from a Harvard dorm room into a billion-dollar empire that helped others understand their feelings through data. The irony wasn't lost on him. He was the world's leading expert on emotional technology, yet he couldn't decode his own emptiness. His phone buzzed, another notification from his social media management app, reminding him he hadn't posted in 4 days. He swiped it away. What would he share? A photo of his minimalist breakfast? His color-coded calendar? The view from his ivory tower? The morning routine began with military precision. Black coffee from his $3,000 espresso machine. Exactly 45 minutes on the Peloton. A shower timed to the second. His reflection in the bathroom mirror revealed a man who looked successful but felt hollow. Sharp jawline, designer stubble, eyes that had forgotten how to truly see. By 7:30 a.m., he was reviewing quarterly reports in his home office when the building's concierge called. "Mr. Holloway, your cleaning service is here. Send them up." He barely looked up from his laptop when the elevator chimed. Footsteps echoed across his marble floors, lighter than usual. The previous cleaning lady, Mrs. Henderson, had heavy, methodical steps that he'd grown accustomed to over 2 years. These were different, cautious, almost musical. "I'll be in my office," he called out without lifting his eyes from the screen. For the next 3 hours he lost himself in algorithms and profit margins, while soft movements floated through his apartment. The woman worked quietly, efficiently. No humming, no phone calls, no disruption to his carefully curated silence. It wasn't until she was gone that he noticed the changes. The throw pillows on his leather couch were arranged differently, not perfectly symmetrical as his cleaning protocol specified, but warmer somehow. More human. A faint scent lingered in the air, something floral and real, cutting through the sterile smell of his high-end air purification system. Then he saw it. On his kitchen counter, next to his pristine coffee machine, lay a small pair of wireless earbuds, pink, worn, one side held together with clear tape. Her child's sticker, a cartoon unicorn, decorated the case. Darren picked them up, turning them over in his hands. They were warm, as if recently used. For the first time in months, something stirred in his chest. Not the calculated emotional responses his apps tracked and analyzed, but something raw, unprocessed. He found the prescription bottle wedged between his couch cushions. Sertraline. The label read, Solène Whitford. He stared at the name, repeating it silently. The medication was for anxiety. He recognized it from Emoticorp's pharmaceutical partnerships. His fingers traced the worn plastic bottle. Someone real had touched this. Someone with struggles, with a name that sounded like poetry, with children who listened to music on broken earbuds. That night, Darren did something he hadn't done in years. He Googled a person not for business, but for curiosity. The search yielded minimal results. No LinkedIn, no Facebook, just a sparse Instagram profile set to private. The profile picture showed a woman's silhouette against a sunset, 3 small figures running ahead of her on what looked like a playground. As he stared at the screen, his biometric sensors recorded an anomaly in his heart rate. His sleep optimization app sent a notification about irregular patterns. His meditation tracker suggested a breathing exercise. But for once, Darren ignored them all. He clutched the pink earbuds and felt something his million-dollar technology couldn't quantify. And tomorrow, he would make a decision that would change everything. Have you ever found yourself so successful on the outside, yet completely empty on the inside? What would you do if a stranger accidentally left behind the only clues to a life filled with real emotions you've forgotten how to feel? Some decisions are made by the heart before the mind even realizes what's happening. Darren stood outside the Metro Clean Services office on 42nd Street, feeling more nervous than he had during his first board meeting. The pink earbuds burned in his jacket pocket like a secret. Through the grimy window, he could see a tired receptionist filing papers behind a desk covered in coffee stains and scattered invoices. The bell above the door chimed as he entered. The woman looked up, her expression shifting from boredom to surprise at his expensive suit and perfectly styled hair. "Can I help you?" she asked, eyeing him suspiciously. "I had a cleaning service yesterday," Darren began, his usually confident voice wavering. "The woman who came, she left something behind. I'd like to return it." "What's the name on the account?" "Holloway. Darren Holloway." She pecked at her computer with 2 fingers, frowning at the screen. "Looks like Solène worked your place yesterday. She's not scheduled to come back for 2 weeks, but I can give her a call." "Actually," Darren interrupted, surprising himself, "could you give me her address? I'd prefer to return it personally." The receptionist's eyes narrowed. "Sir, we don't give out personal information about our employees. Company policy." Darren pulled out his wallet and placed $500 bills on the desk. The woman stared at the money, then at him, then back at the money. "She lives in the Bronx," she whispered, scribbling an address on a post-it note. "Apartment 4B, but if anyone asks, you didn't get this from me." An hour later, Darren sat in his Tesla outside a worn apartment building on Melrose Avenue. The contrast between his gleaming car and the cracked sidewalks felt jarring. Children played in a small courtyard, their laughter echoing off brick walls tagged with colorful graffiti. This wasn't poverty. It was life happening in real time, messy and beautiful and loud. He almost turned around 3 times. Through a 4th-floor window, he glimpsed movement. A woman's silhouette moved back and forth, carrying something in her arms. Then he heard it, children's voices, high and excited, calling out, "Mama, Mama!" His heart hammered against his ribs. What was he doing? He was a CEO, not some stalker following his cleaning lady home. But something deeper than logic kept him rooted to the spot. The building's front door opened and she emerged. Solène Whitford was nothing like he'd imagined, and everything he hadn't known he was looking for. She was tall and graceful, with natural hair pulled back in a colorful head wrap. Her jeans had a small tear at the knee. Her sneakers were scuffed, but she moved with a dignity that made his chest tighten. In one arm, she carried a toddler with chocolate on his face. 2 other small boys flanked her sides, chattering non-stop. "Mama, can we get ice cream?" one pleaded, tugging at her free hand. "Baby, we talked about this," she said gently, shifting the toddler to her hip. "We're going to the store for groceries, remember? Maybe next week." Her voice was warm honey with just a hint of exhaustion underneath. Darren watched, transfixed, as she managed to hold the toddler, grab a diaper bag, fish her phone from her pocket, and shepherd the older boys toward the street, all while maintaining perfect patience. As they walked past his car, the toddler dropped his stuffed elephant. It landed right next to Darren's driver's side door. Without thinking, Darren got out. "Excuse me," he called softly. Solène turned, and for a moment, their eyes met. Hers were deep brown, intelligent, and immediately wary. She recognized him. He could see it in the way her shoulders tensed. "You dropped this," he said, holding up the small grey elephant. The toddler reached out with chubby fingers, babbling happily. Solène took the toy, her hand briefly brushing Darren's. The contact sent electricity up his arm. "Thank you," she said quietly, studying his face. "Mr. Holloway, right? From the penthouse." He nodded, suddenly tongue-tied. So up close she was even more beautiful. Not in the polished way of the women at his corporate events, but in a way that made him want to learn every story written in the lines of her smile. "What are you doing in this neighborhood?" she asked, direct but not unkind. He pulled the earbuds from his pocket. "You left these." Recognition flickered in her eyes, followed by something that might have been embarrassment. She looked down at the worn pink case, then back at him. "You came all the way to the Bronx to return broken headphones." One of the older boys tugged at her shirt. "Mama, who's this man?" "This is Mr. Holloway, baby. He's a client." The boy studied Darren with the unfiltered curiosity of childhood. "Why are you so tall, and why is your car so shiny?" Despite everything, Darren found himself smiling. "I don't know about tall, but the car gets washed a lot." "Can we see inside?" the other boy asked, eyes wide. "Kirsten Callan manners," Solène warned, but there was no real sternness in it. "It's okay," Darren said, then looked at Solène. "Would that be all right?" She hesitated, clearly torn between caution and her children's excitement. Finally, she nodded. For the next 10 minutes, Darren found himself showing 3 little boys every button and screen in his Tesla, while Solène watched from the sidewalk, the toddler now content in her arms. The boys' names were Keston, Callan, and the toddler was Carter, all K names that suited them perfectly. "This is like the Batmobile," Keston exclaimed, pressing his face against the touchscreen. "Better than the Batmobile," Callan added seriously. "Batman doesn't have cup holders." When it was time to go, the boys were reluctant to leave. Carter had fallen asleep against Darren's shoulder, tiny fingers clutching his tie. "He likes you," Solène observed, carefully lifting her son from Darren's arms. "He doesn't usually warm up to strangers." "He's beautiful," Darren said softly. "They all are." Something shifted in Solène's expression. For just a moment, the wariness faded, replaced by something softer. "Thank you for bringing these back," she said, pocketing the earbuds. "You didn't have to do that." "Yes, I did," he replied, and meant it more than he'd meant anything in years. As she walked away with her boys, Darren stood beside his car, watching until they disappeared around the corner. For the first time in his adult life, he didn't want to return to his perfect, empty penthouse. He had no idea that tomorrow everything would change again. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is ask for help, and sometimes it's offering it. 3 days passed before Darren worked up the courage to call Metro Clean Services again. He paced his penthouse office, wearing a path in the Persian rug his interior designer had insisted was essential for executive presence. The pink earbuds sat on his desk like a talisman, next to quarterly reports he couldn't focus on. "I'd like to request Solène specifically for additional cleaning services," he told the receptionist, trying to sound casual. "How often are we talking about, Mr. Holloway?" "Twice a week." The words tumbled out before he could stop them. "My schedule is demanding. I need the extra help." His penthouse had never been cleaner. His smart home system could probably perform surgery in the living room, but he needed a reason, any reason, to see her again. When Thursday arrived, Darren found himself nervously rearranging his already perfect kitchen. He'd bought groceries for the first time in months, not the meal kit deliveries he usually ordered, but actual ingredients: milk, eggs, bread, fruit, things a family might need. The elevator chimed at exactly 9 a.m. "Good morning, Mr. Holloway," Solène said as she entered, her voice professional but guarded. She wore the same company uniform as before, but he noticed she'd added small silver hoop earrings that caught the morning light streaming through his windows. "Good morning, and please call me Darren." She nodded but didn't reciprocate with her first name, maintaining that careful distance. As she began unpacking her supplies, he noticed the pink earbuds clipped to her belt, still held together with tape. "Would you like some coffee?" he offered. "I have that expensive machine, but I'm not sure I'm using it right." Solène paused, seeming to weigh his words for hidden meanings. "That's very kind, but I prefer to work without distractions." "Of course, I'll be in my office." But he wasn't. Every 20 minutes he found excuses to emerge, checking the mail, adjusting the thermostat, getting water from the kitchen. Each time he caught glimpses of her working. She hummed softly while dusting, a melody he didn't recognize but found oddly soothing. When she cleaned his bookshelves, she paused to examine some of his titles, her fingers tracing the spine of a poetry collection he'd bought but never opened. After 2 hours, she was finishing up in the living room when her phone rang. The ringtone was a child's voice singing "Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star." "Hi, baby," she answered, her professional mask melting away. "Mama's at work." "No, honey. The red crayon isn't lost. It's in the art box. Ask Ms. Dolores to help you look, okay?" She listened, her expression growing concerned. "He what? When did the fever start?" Darren emerged from his office, pretending to check his mail. "I'll be there as soon as I can," Solène continued. "Give him the medicine in the fridge, the pink one. I know it tastes yucky, but it'll help." She hung up and stood there for a moment, running her hands over her face. The composed woman he'd met was replaced by a worried mother calculating time and distance and babysitter costs. "Is everything all right?" Darren asked gently. Solène startled, having forgotten he was there. "My son, Carter, the little one you met. He's running a fever, and the babysitter doesn't know what to do. I need to finish here and get 3 more apartments done before I can—" "Go," Darren interrupted. "Go to him." "I can't. I'll lose the accounts if I don't finish today's schedule." "What if—" He hesitated, then pushed forward. "What if I paid for the full day? All the apartments you were supposed to clean, would that cover it?" Solène stared at him. "Mr. Holloway, that's over $400. "Darren," he corrected softly. "And yes, I know. Why would you do that?" The question hung between them. Why would he? Because a child he'd met for 10 minutes was sick? Because he remembered the way Carter had fallen asleep against his shoulder, because the thought of this woman choosing between her child's health and her livelihood made his chest ache. "Because he likes Batman and cup holders," Darren said finally, "and because you shouldn't have to choose." For the first time since he'd met her, Solene's careful composure cracked. Her eyes filled with tears, she quickly blinked away. "I can't accept charity," she said quietly. "It's not charity, it's—" He searched for the right words. "Consider it a consulting fee. You're teaching me something I never learned." "What's that?" "How to care about someone other than myself." The admission surprised them both. Solene studied his face, looking for deception or ulterior motives. Whatever she saw there must have satisfied her, because she nodded slowly. "I'll pay you back," she said firmly. "You already have." As she gathered her things, Darren found himself speaking again. "If you need anything else, for Carter, I mean, medicine or a doctor visit or—" "Thank you," she interrupted, but her voice was softer now. "Really, this means more than you know." She was almost to the elevator when she turned back. "Darren." His name sounded different in her voice, warmer. Would you like to meet them properly? The boys, I mean. Maybe this weekend?" His heart stopped, started again, raced. "I'd like that very much. Saturday afternoon. There's a playground on 161st Street near Yankee Stadium. 2 o'clock? I'll be there." After she left, Darren stood in his pristine apartment, surrounded by silence and the lingering scent of her presence. He walked to his windows, looking out at Manhattan's endless sprawl, and for the first time in years, Saturday felt impossibly far away. He picked up the poetry book Solene had been examining and opened it for the first time. The first poem was about loneliness in crowded places. The second was about finding light in unexpected darkness. He was beginning to understand both. He had conquered boardrooms and algorithms, but 3 little boys would prove to be his greatest teachers. Saturday arrived, wrapped in October sunshine and Darren's paralyzing anxiety. He stood in front of his walk-in closet at 11 a.m., having already changed clothes 4 times. What did one wear to a playground? His usual uniform of tailored suits seemed ridiculous, but his limited casual wardrobe felt foreign on his body. He finally settled on dark jeans and a navy sweater, then spent 20 minutes Googling what to bring to playground and how to talk to children. The search results felt inadequate for the magnitude of what he was attempting. By 1:45 p.m., he was parked near Yankee Stadium, watching families stream through the playground gates. Fathers pushed strollers while juggling coffee cups and diaper bags. Mothers chased toddlers who seemed determined to climb everything in sight. The chaos looked simultaneously exhausting and wonderful. He spotted them before they saw him. Solene walked through the entrance carrying Carter, who looked much better than he had on Thursday. The boy's chubby cheeks had returned to their normal golden-brown color, and he was animatedly pointing at the swings. Keston and Callan raced ahead, their identical Batman backpacks bouncing as they ran toward the jungle gym. "Mr. Carman!" Callan shouted when he spotted Darren, using the nickname he'd apparently assigned him. "You came? Did you bring the shiny car?" "I did," Darren smiled, feeling some of his nervousness evaporate. "But I thought we might walk around instead, if that's okay with your mum." Solene approached more cautiously, studying his face. She wore leggings and an oversized Columbia University sweatshirt that had seen better days. Her hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, and she looked younger, more relaxed than he'd ever seen her. "How's he feeling?" Darren asked, nodding toward Carter. "Much better. The fever broke yesterday morning." She shifted the toddler to her other hip. "Thank you again for Thursday. I don't know what I would have done." "You would have figured it out," he said simply. "You always do." Something flickered in her eyes. Surprise, maybe, that he'd noticed her strength. "Mama, can we show him the rocket ship?" Keyston asked, tugging at her sweatshirt. "If Mr. Holloway wants to see it." "Darren," he corrected automatically. "And yes, I'd love to see the rocket ship." The next hour unfolded like something from a movie Darren had never thought he'd star in. The boys led him through their playground kingdom, explaining the complex rules of their imaginary games. The jungle gym was a space station. The slides were escape pods. The monkey bars were the path through an asteroid field. "You have to make the whoosh sound," Keston explained seriously as they climbed the structure. "Otherwise the engines don't work." Darren found himself whooshing with genuine enthusiasm, his expensive jeans getting dirty from playground mulch. When Callan got scared halfway across the monkey bars, Darren spotted him carefully, offering quiet encouragement. "You've got this, buddy. One hand, then the other. I'm right here." Solene watched from a bench nearby, Carter playing with blocks at her feet. Every time Darren looked over, She seemed to be studying him with that same cautious curiosity. "Push me higher," Keston called from the swings. "How high is higher?" Darren asked, positioning himself behind the swing. "To the moon. I don't think my insurance covers moon travel," Darren replied, earning a giggle. "How about just to the clouds?" As he pushed the swing, Darren caught glimpses of Solene's smile. It was the first unguarded expression he'd seen from her, and it was radiant. When Carter toddled over and raised his arms to be picked up, Darren hesitated for only a moment before lifting the little boy. Carter immediately began an animated conversation in toddler gibberish, gesturing wildly at the playground equipment. "He's telling you about the ducks," Solene translated, joining them. "There's a pond behind the playground. We come here to feed them sometimes." "What does he like to feed them?" "Broken crackers, usually, whatever we have." She said it matter-of-factly, but Darren heard the subtext. Whatever they could afford. "Could we see the ducks?" he asked. "All of us?" Solene nodded, and they collected the older boys for an expedition to the small pond tucked behind the playground. Darren had passed this park dozens of times in his car, but had never noticed the peaceful water feature surrounded by benches and willow trees. "We don't have any food," Callan observed sadly as they approached the water. "Actually," Darren said, pulling a bag from his pocket, "I brought some crackers. You know, just in case." He'd bought them at a corner store on the way, hoping for exactly this moment. The boys' faces lit up as he distributed the crackers, showing them how to break them into small pieces. "Not too big," Keston instructed seriously. "Baby ducks can choke." As they fed the ducks, Darren found himself sitting on a bench beside Solene, Carter on his lap, watching the older boys compete to see who could throw the farthest. "You're good with them," Solene said quietly. "They're easy to be good with. They don't judge. They don't want anything except attention and crackers. Most adults want things too. That's why I was suspicious when you showed up at my building." Darren turned to look at her. "What do you think I want?" She was quiet for a long moment, watching her sons. "I'm still figuring that out." "Maybe I'm figuring it out too." When the crackers were gone and the boys had thoroughly exhausted themselves, they walked slowly back toward the playground entrance. Carter had fallen asleep in Darren's arms, his small hand clutching the fabric of Darren's sweater. "I should get them home," Solene said as they reached the gate. "Bath time, dinner, the whole evening routine." "Of course." Darren carefully transferred the sleeping toddler to her arms. "Thank you for today. I can't remember the last time I—" "What?" "Felt useful," he finished honestly. Solene studied his face in the golden afternoon light. "You want to do this again?" His heart jumped. "If you'll let me. Next Saturday, same time. I'll be here." As he watched them walk away, Keston and Callan chattering about rockets and ducks, Solene carrying Carter with practiced ease, Darren realized something profound had shifted inside him. The constant hum of anxiety that had plagued him for months was quiet. The need to check his phone, to optimize and control every moment, had simply disappeared. For 3 hours he had been fully present in a way his meditation apps had never achieved. Driving home through the Bronx streets, he passed bodegas and barbershops, apartment buildings where families lived real lives, with real problems and real joy. His penthouse awaited pristine and silent and empty, but for the first time, empty didn't feel like peace. It felt like a problem he was finally ready to solve. Sometimes the walls we build to protect ourselves become the very prisons that keep us from living. The week between playground visits crawled by with agonizing slowness. Darren found himself distracted during board meetings, doodling rocket ships in the margins of quarterly reports. His assistant, Waverly, noticed his unusual behavior when he declined 3 networking events and asked her to clear his Saturday schedule indefinitely. "Are you feeling all right, Mr. Holloway?" she asked during their Friday briefing. "You seem different lately." "Different how?" "Less," she searched for the diplomatic word, "intense. You smiled at the maintenance guy yesterday. I don't think I've seen you do that in 2 years." Thursday's cleaning appointment had taken on new significance. When Solene arrived, Darren was waiting with fresh coffee and questions about Carter's recovery. She accepted the coffee this time, a small but meaningful shift in their dynamic. "He's been asking about the nice tall man," she said, settling into the kitchen bar stool he'd pulled out for her. "Wants to know when he can see the shiny car again." "What did you tell him?" "That may be soon." She paused, studying his face. "If his mama thinks it's a good idea." "And what does his mama think?" Solene took a slow sip of coffee, considering. "His mama thinks you're either the kindest man she's ever met or the most elaborate con artist in Manhattan." "Which way are you leaning?" "Jury's still out." but her smile suggested the verdict might be favorable. Saturday arrived grey and drizzling, the kind of October day that threatened to derail outdoor plans. Darren stood under the playground pavilion, watching the empty swings sway in the breeze when he spotted them approaching through the mist. Solène carried an oversized umbrella and a look of disappointment. The boys trudged behind her, their excitement dimmed by the weather. "I should have called," she said when they reached him. "This was a bad idea in the rain." "Actually," Darren said, surprising himself with his spontaneity, "I had a different idea, if you're open to it." 20 minutes later, they stood outside the Children's Museum of Manhattan. Darren had called in a favor with a board member to arrange after-hours access, something he'd never thought to use for personal reasons. "If we have the whole place to ourselves for 2 hours, he explained as a security guard let them in. The boys' eyes went wide as they entered the colorful, interactive wonderland. Keston immediately ran toward a giant bubble station. Callan made a beeline for the construction zone filled with foam blocks and toy bulldozers. Even Carter, normally clingy in new environments, toddled off to explore a sensory play area designed for toddlers. "This must have cost a fortune," Solène said quietly, watching her sons discover room after room of wonders. "Some things are worth it." "Like what?" Darren watched Kester carefully blow a bubble the size of a basketball, his face serious with concentration. "Like seeing that." For the next hour, Darren found himself crawling through tunnels, building block towers, and getting thoroughly defeated at a child-sized racing game by Callan, who possessed an inexplicable talent for virtual driving. "You're terrible at this," Callan observed matter-of-factly, as Darren's cartoon car crashed into a digital wall for the third time. "I'm beginning to notice that," Darren laughed. "Maybe you could teach me?" "You have to feel the car," Callan explained, with the wisdom of a 5-year-old. "Don't think so much, just go." The advice felt profound coming from someone who barely came up to Darren's waist. In the art studio, Keston discovered finger paints and immediately began creating what he declared was a portrait of space. The painting looked like a hurricane had hit a rainbow, but Keston was incredibly proud. "This is you," he said, pointing to a tall blue smudge. "And this is us," he added, indicating 3 smaller smudges in various colors. "And this is Mama." The yellow figure in the center somehow managed to look warm and protective, despite being an abstract blob. Darren stared at the painting, feeling an unexpected tightness in his throat. In Keston's vision, he belonged. He was part of the family constellation, even if he was just a blue smudge on the periphery. "Can I keep this?" he asked seriously. "Really?" Keston beamed. "Nobody ever wants to keep my art except Mama. This is going in a place of honor." Meanwhile, Solène had been watching from across the room, helping Carter navigate a toddler obstacle course. But Darren felt her eyes on him frequently, observing how he interacted with her sons, looking for red flags or hidden agendas. When Carter successfully climbed a foam mountain and slid down the other side, he immediately ran to Darren with arms outstretched, babbling excitedly about his accomplishment. "He's telling you he's a big boy now," Solène translated, joining them. "I can see that," Darren said, lifting Carter up. "Very impressive, buddy." As closing time approached, they gathered in the museum's central atrium. The boys were tired but happy, clutching small toys from the gift shop that Darren had quietly purchased while Solène wasn't looking. "This was incredible," Solène said, watching Callan try to stay awake while leaning against a colorful pillar. "They'll remember this forever." "Good," Darren said simply, "but you can't keep doing this." The words hit him like cold water. "What do you mean?" "Grand gestures. Expensive experiences. They'll start expecting it, and when you get bored and move on." She trailed off, but the implication was clear. "What makes you think I'll get bored?" "Everyone does eventually. Rich men especially. When the novelty wears off, when you remember you have a real life to get back to." Darren felt something fierce and protective rise in his chest. "This is my real life. This, right here, with you and them. This is the most real I've felt in years." Solène studied his face, searching for cracks in his sincerity. "You say that now. I mean it now, and I'll mean it tomorrow and next week and next month." "You don't know that." "You're right. I don't know that. But I'd like the chance to prove it." The silence stretched between them, while the boys played quietly nearby, their energy finally depleted. Rain continued to streak the museum's tall windows, creating patterns of light and shadow on the floor. "Okay," Solène said finally. "But no more museums, no more grand gestures. What then? Real life, grocery shopping, laundry, the boring, ordinary stuff that makes up actual days." Darren nodded. "I'd like that too." As they prepared to leave, Carton fell asleep in Darren's arms. The weight of the little boy, trusting and warm, felt like both a gift and a responsibility. "He really likes you," Solène observed as they waited for their taxi. "The feeling's mutual. All of them do. They've been talking about you all week." "And what about their mum?" The question slipped out before he could stop it. Solène looked at him for a long moment, rain pattering on the umbrella above them. "Their mum is starting to think maybe the jury reached a verdict, but neither of them was prepared for how quickly everything was about to change. Love isn't found in perfect moments. It's built in the messy, ordinary spaces between them." The text came on Tuesday evening while Darren was reviewing contracts. "Carter has an ear infection. Taking him to urgent care. Might have to cancel Thursday cleaning." Darren stared at the message, his chest tightening with worry for a little boy who'd become impossibly important to him. Without thinking, he called her. "Hello?" Solène's voice was strained, background noise suggesting they were in a waiting room. "How is he? Do you need anything?" "We're still waiting to see the doctor. He's been crying for hours and the fever's back." "Which urgent care?" "Bronx, Lebanon. Why?" "I'm coming." "Darren, you don't need to." "Yes, I do." 40 minutes later, he found them in the pediatric waiting room. Carter was listless in Solène's arms, his usual bright energy replaced by feverish exhaustion. Keston and Callan sat on either side of her, unusually quiet, their Batman backpacks at their feet. "What are you guys doing here so late?" Darren asked, settling into the chair across from them. "Daycare called when Carter got sick," Solène explained, adjusting the little boy's position. "I had to pick all three up. Couldn't find a sitter on short notice." The boys perked up when they saw him. "Mr. Carman," Callan whispered, mindful of the hospital setting. "Did you bring crayons?" "Actually," Darren said, pulling a small activity book from his jacket, "I brought something better." For the next hour, while they waited for Carter's name to be called, Darren helped Keston and Callan with sticker activities and word searches. He noticed everything: how Solène checked her watch constantly, calculating missed work hours, how she whispered reassurances to Carter in both English and what sounded like French, how she discreetly counted the bills in her wallet when she thought no one was looking. "Carter Whitford," a nurse finally called. "I'll wait here with the boys," Darren offered. Solène hesitated. "Are you sure it could be another hour? We'll be fine, won't we, guys?" After she disappeared with Carter, Darren found himself alone with Keston and Callan in a hospital waiting room at 9 p.m. on a Tuesday. 6 months ago, the scenario would have terrified him. Now it felt natural. "Is Carter going to be okay?" Keston asked, climbing into the chair beside Darren. "The doctors here are really good at fixing ear infections. He'll feel better soon." "Mama's worried," Callan observed with the intuition children possess. "She gets lines on her face when she's worried. Your mama loves you all very much. That's why she worries." "Do you worry about us?" Keston asked with startling directness. The question caught Darren off guard. "Yes," he answered honestly. "I do." "Good," Keston nodded approvingly. "That means you love us too." The simple logic of it made Darren's throat tight. When Solène emerged an hour later with a sleepy but slightly improved Carter, she looked exhausted. "Ear infection, like we thought," she reported. "Antibiotics and rest. He should be better in a few days." "That's great news," Darren said, noting the prescription bag in her hand and the way she avoided looking at the receipt. Outside the hospital, as they waited for their rides, Carter reached for Darren from his mother's arms. The little boy settled against Darren's shoulder with a contented sigh. "He missed you," Solène said softly. "I missed him too." "All of them did. They keep asking when you're coming over for real dinner." "Real dinner? At our place? Not restaurants or museums. Just our kitchen table and whatever I can afford to cook." Darren's heart raced. An invitation to her home felt monumental. "I'd love that. Friday night. Nothing fancy. Probably spaghetti and whatever vegetables are on sale." "Perfect." Friday evening found Darren standing outside the same apartment building where he'd first followed her, but this time clutching a bag of groceries and fighting genuine nerves. He'd spent 20 minutes in the bodega on the corner, trying to look casual while buying ingredients that might supplement dinner without seeming presumptuous. Apartment 4B was smaller than his walk-in closet, but it was warm and lived in and absolutely beautiful. Children's artwork covered the refrigerator. Toys were organized in colorful bins. A small dining table by the window held homework papers and a vase with grocery store flowers. "Welcome to our chaos," Solène said, taking his jacket. The boys immediately commandeered him for a tour. Their bedroom featured bunk beds and glow-in-the-dark stars on the ceiling. Carter's crib was in Solène's room, which was barely large enough for a double bed and a dresser, but somehow felt cozy rather than cramped. "This is where Mama keeps the good snacks," Callan whispered conspiratorially, pointing to a high cabinet. "The ones we only get on special days." "Is today a special day?" Darren asked. "Yeah," Keston said seriously. "You're here." Dinner was indeed spaghetti, served with garlic bread and a salad made from the vegetables Darren had brought. The boys chattered non-stop, telling him about school and friends and their elaborate plans for Halloween costumes. Carter, feeling much better, banged his sippy cup on his high chair and babbled importantly whenever there was a lull in conversation. "This is the best meal I've had in years," Darren said, and meant it completely. "It's just pasta," Solène laughed. "No, it's not just pasta." After dinner, while Solène gave Carter a bath, Darren found himself reading bedtime stories to Keston and Callan. They chose a book about a dragon who was afraid of flying, and Darren found himself doing voices for all the characters, much to the boys' delight. "You're really good at the scary dragon voice," Keston observed sleepily. "And the wise owl," Callan added. "Will you read to us again?" "If your mom says it's okay." When Solène emerged from the bathroom with a pajama-clad Carter, she found all three of them asleep in the bottom bunk, Darren in the middle, a boy curled against each shoulder, the storybook still open on his lap. She stood in the doorway for a long moment, her heart doing something complicated in her chest. This man who commanded boardrooms and built empires was letting two 5-year-olds use him as a pillow, and he looked more peaceful than she'd ever seen him. "Boys," she whispered, "time to get in your own beds." They stirred reluctantly, giving Darren sleepy hugs before climbing into their bunks. As Solène tucked them in, Keston's voice drifted down from the top bunk. "Mama, is Darren gonna be our dad?" The question hung in the air like a held breath. Solène's eyes met Darren's over Callan's head. "That's not how it works, baby," she said gently, "but he's our friend, a very good friend." "Can good friends stay for breakfast?" Callan asked hopefully. "If they want to," Solène said, still looking at Darren. "I want to," he said quietly. Later, after the boys were asleep and Carter was settled in his crib, Darren and Solène sat on her small couch, sharing a cup of tea and the comfortable silence of a successful evening. "Thank you," she said finally. "For what? For showing up, for the hospital, for tonight, for proving that maybe I was wrong about the getting bored part. You weren't wrong to be cautious. I would have been too in your position. But I meant what I said. This is real for me, all of it." Solène studied his profile in the lamplight. "What happens now?" "I don't know," Darren admitted. "I've never done this before. Any of this. Neither have I. Not like this." They sat quietly, both aware that something fundamental had shifted. They'd crossed a line from acquaintances to something deeper, messier, more complicated. "I should go," Darren said eventually, though he made no move to leave. "You should," she agreed, not moving either. When he finally did leave, it was with plans for Saturday's playground visit and the taste of something new and terrifying and wonderful on his lips. He was falling in love with all of them, and for the first time in his life, the unknown felt like coming home. Sometimes the hardest part of falling in love isn't admitting it to the other person, it's admitting it to yourself. The panic attack hit Darren during a Monday morning board meeting, 3 weeks after the dinner at Solène's apartment. He was presenting quarterly projections when suddenly the conference room felt airless, the walls closing in. His chest tightened, his vision blurred, and the numbers on his screen became meaningless symbols. "Excuse me," he managed, leaving 12 confused executives staring after him as he fled to his office. Waverley found him 20 minutes later, sitting on his office floor with his head between his knees, trying to remember how to breathe normally. "Sir, should I call a doctor?" "No," he gasped. "Just cancel the rest of my meetings today." "All of them? Including the Hartwell Industries presentation?" "All of them." As the day progressed, Darren couldn't shake the feeling that his carefully constructed world was tilting off its axis. For the past month, he'd been living 2 completely different lives: Emoticorp CEO by day, surrogate father figure by evening, and the cognitive dissonance was finally catching up with him. His phone buzzed with a text from Solène. "Boys keep asking when you're coming for dinner again. Keston drew you another picture. This one has you with a cape because you're super good at reading voices." The message should have warmed him. Instead, it triggered another wave of anxiety. What was he doing? Playing house with a woman and her children when he didn't know the first thing about being a father, about being a partner, about being anything other than a lonely workaholic who'd stumbled into someone else's beautiful, complicated life? That evening, Instead of going to see them as he'd planned, Darren remained in his penthouse, staring out at Manhattan's glittering skyline and trying to convince himself that some distance might be healthy for all of them. The text came at 8:30 p.m. "Everything okay? Boys are disappointed, but we understand if you're busy." He stared at the message for an hour before responding. "Work emergency. Rain check?" It was a lie, and he suspected she knew it. Tuesday brought another cancelled visit. Wednesday, he avoided Solenne's cleaning appointment by scheduling an off-site meeting. By Thursday, his anxiety had crystallized into something sharper. Fear. Fear that he was in over his head. Fear that he'd eventually disappoint them, the way he'd disappointed everyone else who'd tried to get close. Fear that Keston's innocent question about him becoming their dad had revealed the impossible gulf between what the boys needed and what he could actually provide. Friday morning, Waverly knocked on his office door with an expression he'd never seen before, determined and slightly angry. "You have a visitor," she announced. "I'm not taking meetings today." She didn't ask for a meeting. She asked for 5 minutes of basic human decency. Before Darren could respond, Solène walked into his office. She looked different here, smaller somehow against the backdrop of his corporate empire. Her cleaning company uniform had been replaced by jeans and a sweater, but she still seemed out of place among his leather furniture and floor-to-ceiling windows. "Nice office," she said, but there was no admiration in her voice. Very intimidating. "Solène, You're scared," she interrupted, crossing her arms. "That's fine, I get it, but you don't get to just disappear without explanation. I've been busy with—" "Don't." Her voice was quiet but firm. "Don't lie to me. We've moved past that." Darren sank into his desk chair, suddenly exhausted. "You're right. I am scared. Of what? Of screwing this up, of letting them down, of pretending I can be something I'm not." Solène studied his face, and he could see her weighing his words, deciding whether they were genuine or just another excuse. "Keston cried Tuesday night," she said finally. "Asked me if he did something wrong, if that's why you didn't come to dinner." The words hit Darren like physical blows. "I never wanted—" "I know, but that's what happened anyway." She moved closer to his desk. "You want to know what I told him?" Darren nodded, afraid to speak. "I told him that sometimes adults get scared when they care about people too much. That fear makes them run away, even when running away is the last thing they actually want to do. Solène, I also told him that the best adults figure out how to be brave anyway, how to stay even when it's scary." The silence stretched between them, heavy with possibility and pain. "I don't know how to be a father," Darren admitted quietly. "Nobody does at first. You think I knew how to be a mother when I had 3 babies at once? I figured it out by showing up every day and trying not to mess them up too badly. It's different. You're their actual parent. And what are you?" The question hung in the air. What was he? Not their father, not really their family, but something more than a friend, something undefined and terrifying and precious. "I don't know," he whispered. "Maybe that's okay. Maybe you don't have to know right now." Solène walked to his windows, looking out at the city sprawling below. "You know what Callan said yesterday?" "What?" "He said he hopes you come back soon, because you're the only grown-up who remembers to make the whoosh sounds on the swings." Despite everything, Darren smiled. "The engines don't work without the whoosh sounds." "Exactly." She turned back to him. "They don't need you to be perfect, Darren. They just need you to be there." "And what do you need?" The question surprised them both. Solène's carefully maintained composure flickered, revealing something vulnerable underneath. "I need—" she started, then stopped. "I need to know this isn't just some midlife crisis for you, some experiment in playing normal that you'll get tired of when it gets too real." "It is real, that's why I'm scared." "Then be scared and stay anyway." She moved toward the door, then paused. "They're making Halloween costumes this weekend. All superheroes, because apparently you told them that regular people can be heroes too. Carter's going to be Super Baby, whatever that means." "What are you going as?" "Wonder Woman." "Keston's idea. He says I already have the invisible jet because I make dinner appear out of nothing and somehow keep everyone safe." Darren's chest tightened with something that felt like love and grief and hope all tangled together. "What about me?" he asked. "Am I invited to the costume party?" "That depends. Are you planning to show up?" "Yes. Even if it's scary." "Especially if it's scary." For the first time since she'd walked into his office, Solène smiled. "Good, because I already bought fabric for your cape." After she left, Darren sat in his office for a long time, watching the sun set over Manhattan. His panic felt different now, still present but manageable. He wasn't ready for fatherhood, might never be ready in any traditional sense, but maybe Solène was right. Maybe readiness wasn't the point. Maybe love was about showing up anyway. He pulled out his phone and typed, "Tell Keston I'm sorry I missed dinner, and tell him Super Baby's uncle needs to practice his whoosh sounds before Saturday." The response came immediately. "Uncle?" Darren stared at the word he'd typed without thinking. Uncle. Not father, not stranger, but something in between. Something that felt possible. "If that's okay," he replied. "More than okay. See you Saturday, Uncle Darren." And for the first time all week, he could breathe again. Family isn't just about blood, it's about choosing to love the same people every single day. Halloween afternoon found Darren standing in front of his bathroom mirror, adjusting a homemade cape that Solène had crafted from navy blue fabric and silver trim. The letter D was emblazoned on the chest in metallic thread, not for Darren, but for dependable, according to Keston's very serious superhero logic. Every hero needs a superpower, the 5-year-old had explained during their planning session. Yours is showing up when people need you. Now, as Darren examined his reflection, he felt the weight of that designation. The cape looked ridiculous with his jeans and sneakers, but somehow it also felt right, like armor for the man he was trying to become. His phone buzzed. "Uncle Darren, where are you? Super Baby is getting cranky and Wonder Woman can't find her lasso." He smiled, grabbing the bag of Halloween candy he'd bought, the good stuff, full-size bars that would make him a legend in the neighborhood, and headed for the Bronx. The scene that greeted him at apartment 4B was beautiful chaos. Keston had transformed into a remarkably convincing Batman, complete with cardboard utility belt and a cape that dragged behind him. Callan wore a red and blue outfit that was supposed to be Superman, but looked more like a very enthusiastic, patriotic toddler. And Carter, true to his designation as Super Baby, sported a tiny cape and a onesie with SB drawn in washable marker. But it was Solène who took his breath away. Her Wonder Woman costume was clearly homemade, a red top, blue skirt, and cardboard bracelets covered in aluminum foil. But she wore it with such confidence that she looked like she'd stepped off a movie screen. Her hair was curled and flowing, and she'd somehow fashioned a golden tiara from craft supplies. "Uncle D!" Callan shouted, launching himself into Darren's arms. "You look like a real superhero." "You all look incredible," Darren said, spinning Callan around. "I think we might be the most powerful superhero team in the Bronx." "We need a name," Keston declared seriously. "All superhero teams have names." "How about the Fantastic Family?" Solène suggested, then blushed slightly at her own words. "Yes!" all 3 boys shouted in unison. "The Fantastic Family it is," Darren agreed, his heart doing something complicated at the word family. Their first stop was the building's Halloween party in the community room. Mrs. Rodriguez from 2A had organized games and treats for all the kids in the building. Darren found himself judging a costume contest, helping with a pumpkin decorating station, and somehow getting roped into leading a superhero dance party. "You're a natural," Solène observed, watching him teach a group of kids the Superman flying dance move. "I'm mostly just copying what they do and making it bigger," he confessed. "That's what good parenting is half the time." The word parenting should have triggered his usual anxiety, but somehow it didn't. Maybe because he was too busy making sure Carter didn't eat his cape, or helping Keston retrieve his cardboard batarang from under a table, or cheering as Callan won the superhero trivia contest. After the party, they ventured out for trick-or-treating. The Bronx neighborhood had embraced Halloween with enthusiasm. Houses were decorated with spider webs and jack-o'-lanterns, parents in costume escorted groups of children from door to door, and the whole area buzzed with excitement. "Stay close to Uncle Darren," Solène instructed the boys as they approached their first house. "Why?" Callan asked. "Because he's got the biggest candy bag," she winked. "And the best cape," Keston added. "And the loudest trick-or-treat voice," Callan chimed in. As they made their way through the neighborhood, Darren began to understand something profound about family life. It wasn't the big moments that mattered most. It was the accumulation of small ones. Helping Carton navigate uneven sidewalks in his tiny costume, listening to Keston explain the complex mythology he'd created for his Batman character, watching Callan carefully negotiate candy trades with other children, and stealing glances at Solène, who moved through it all with the grace of a woman who'd learned to find joy in everyday magic. "You're staring," she said quietly, during a moment when the boys were comparing candy hauls under a streetlight. "Sorry, I didn't say stop." The flirtation was gentle, natural, but it sent warmth spreading through his chest. Their last stop was a house known throughout the neighborhood for its elaborate decorations. The elderly man who answered the door was dressed as a wizard, complete with a long beard and twinkling lights woven into his robes. "Well, well," he said, looking at their group, "if it isn't the most heroic family on Melrose Avenue." "We're the Fantastic Family," Carton announced proudly, though it came out more like Fantastic Family. "I can see that," the wizard smiled. "And what's your superpower, young man?" he asked Darren. Before Darren could answer, Keston piped up. "He shows up when we need him, and he makes really good whoosh sounds." "Those are excellent superpowers," the wizard agreed solemnly, dropping extra candy into each of their bags. As they walked home, candy-drunk children trailing behind them, Solène slipped her hand into Darren's. The gesture was simple, natural, but it felt like crossing another threshold. "Thank you," she said quietly. "For what this time? For proving that some people really do stick around, for giving them a Halloween they'll remember forever. I'll remember it forever too." Back at the apartment, they sorted candy while the boys recounted their favorite moments of the night. Carton fell asleep in his costume, sprawled across Darren's lap with chocolate on his cheek and his tiny cape twisted around his body. "He's gotten so attached to you," Solène observed, carefully removing the baby's cape so he could sleep more comfortably. "The feeling's mutual. All of them have. You know that, right?" Darren looked around the small living room, at Keston and Callan building a fort out of couch cushions, at the Halloween decorations Solène had made by hand, at the family photos on every surface, and felt something settle in his chest. "I love them," he said simply. "All of them. Even when they're cranky and covered in chocolate and fighting about who gets the last Snickers bar? Especially then." Solène studied his face in the lamplight. "And what about their mum?" The question hung between them, loaded with possibility and risk. "Their mum," Darren said carefully, "is the strongest, most beautiful, most inspiring woman I've ever met. And if I'm being completely honest, yes, I'm falling in love with her too." Solène's breath caught. For a moment she looked like she might cry. "Darren, you don't have to say anything back. I just needed you to know." "What if I wanted to say something back? Then I'd listen very carefully." She leaned closer, her voice barely a whisper. "What if I said I've been falling too, and that it terrifies me and thrills me and feels like the most natural thing in the world all at the same time? Then I'd ask if I could kiss you. Then I'd say yes." The kiss was soft, tentative, full of promise and patience. When they broke apart, Carton stirred in Darren's arms, and Keston's voice drifted from the cushioned fort. "Mama, is Uncle Darren going to live with us now?" Solène and Darren looked at each other, both aware that a 5-year-old had just asked the question they'd both been thinking, but were afraid to voice. "We'll see, baby," Solène called back, "but he's definitely part of our family now." "Good," came Keston's sleepy response. "Our superhero team needs him." And as Darren sat there, holding a sleeping toddler while the woman he loved smiled at him in the soft lamplight, he realized that Keston was absolutely right. Sometimes love isn't about having all the answers. It's about facing the questions together. The call came at 2:47 a.m. on a Tuesday in mid-November. Darren was in his penthouse reviewing budget projections when his phone rang with Solène's ringtone, a recording of the boys singing "Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star" that he'd set months ago. "Darren?" Her voice was strained, thick with tears he could hear even through the phone. "What's wrong? Are the boys okay?" "They're fine. They're asleep. But I need help. I'm on my way." He threw on clothes and called his driver, making the trip from Manhattan to the Bronx in record time. Solène met him at the building's entrance, wrapped in a robe and shivering despite the mild autumn night. "I'm sorry for calling so late," she began, but he cut her off with a gentle touch to her arm. "Don't apologize. What happened?" "The pipes burst in Mrs. Chen's apartment upstairs. Water's been pouring into my bedroom for hours. Everything's soaked. The bed, the dresser, most of our clothes." As they climbed the stairs, Darren could hear the steady drip of water and see the dark stains spreading across the hallway ceiling. Inside apartment 4B, the damage was worse than he'd imagined. Solène's bedroom was a disaster zone, water still dripping from the ceiling, puddles covering the floor, and the smell of mildew already beginning to set in. "The landlord says it'll take at least 2 weeks to fix," Solène explained, her voice hollow. "Maybe longer. And I can't afford a hotel for that long, not with all 4 of us." Darren surveyed the damage, his mind already calculating solutions. "What about staying with friends? Family? My mum's in a nursing home in Queens. My sister lives in Portland with her own family cramped into a 1-bedroom. And most of my friends are in the same situation I am, barely making rent, No space for extra people. She sank onto the couch, which had escaped the worst of the flooding, and put her head in her hands. I worked so hard to make this place feel like home for them. It's not much, but it was ours, you know? Darren's heart broke, watching her try to hold it together. This woman who faced every challenge with grace and determination was finally reaching her breaking point. "Come stay with me," he said quietly. Solène looked up, her eyes red from crying. "Darren, I can't. Your penthouse, it's not set up for children. And besides, what would people think? Your neighbors, your business associates. I don't care what they think." "Well, I do. I won't be seen as some woman who moved in with her rich boyfriend after a few months. I have a reputation to protect, my own dignity. That's not what this would be, isn't it? What else would people think?" Darren knelt in front of her, taking her hands in his. "Solène, I love you. I love the boys. When I think about my future, I see all of you in it. This isn't about charity or convenience. It's about family, taking care of family. We're not family, not legally, not really." The word stung, but he understood her fear. "Maybe not legally, but in every way that matters to me, you are." She was quiet for a long moment, wrestling with pride and practicality. "Even if I wanted to say yes, your place isn't child-proofed. You have priceless art, expensive gadgets, white everything. 3 little boys would destroy it in a day. Then we'll child-proof it. We'll move the breakable stuff. We'll buy washable slipcovers for everything. You're talking about turning your perfect penthouse into a daycare center. I'm talking about turning my empty apartment into a home." From the boys' bedroom came the sound of Carter crying, probably disturbed by the unfamiliar sounds and commotion. Solène started to get up, but Darren was already moving. "I've got him." He found the toddler standing in his crib, confused and frightened by the chaos around him. When Carter saw Darren, his tears stopped immediately, and he reached out with both arms. "Uncle D," he babbled, settling against Darren's shoulder with the complete trust that still amazed him. Keston and Callan were awake too, sitting up in their bunks and looking worried. "What's happening, Uncle Darren?" Keston asked. "Why is everything wet?" "There was a little accident with the water pipes," Darren explained, sitting on the edge of the bottom bunk with Carter still in his arms. "But everything's going to be okay." "Are we going to be homeless?" Callan asked with the directness children possessed. "No, buddy, you're never going to be homeless. Uncle Darren promises." "Where are we going to live?" Keston wanted to know. Darren looked toward the doorway, where Solène was listening to his conversation with her sons. "That's up to your mom, but I have an idea if she's willing to hear it." An hour later, after they'd salvaged what they could from the flooded bedroom, and the boys had fallen back asleep on the couch, Darren and Solène sat at her small kitchen table, drinking tea and talking about impossible things. "I can't just move in with you," she said for the 3rd time. "What kind of example does that set for the boys? The example that people who love each other take care of each other. We haven't even talked about what this is between us, where it's going. Whether you want—" She stopped herself. "Whether I want what? More children, marriage, a permanent life together. All the things that come with being part of a family with 3 kids. Darren was quiet for a moment, considering her words. "A year ago, I would have said no to all of that. I would have been terrified of the responsibility, the commitment, the loss of control over my perfectly ordered life. And now? Now I know that my perfectly ordered life was just an expensive way of being alone." He reached across the table for her hand. "I want it all, Solène. The chaos, the mess, the beautiful impossibility of it. I want Saturday morning pancakes and school plays and bedtime stories. I want to teach them to drive and walk them down wedding aisles and spoil their children. I want to build a life with you that's big enough for all the love I didn't know I was capable of." Tears spilled down her cheeks. "Darren, I know it's fast, I know it's complicated, but when I think about my future, I can't picture it without you and the boys in it. What if it doesn't work? What if we try living together and discover we drive each other crazy? What if the boys get too attached and then everything falls apart? What if it does work? What if we discover we're even better together than we are apart? What if this is exactly what all of us have been missing?" She was quiet for a long time, staring into her tea. "They'd have their own rooms in your penthouse? Their own rooms, their own bathroom, a playroom if we can find the space. Whatever they need. And you'd really be okay with the noise, the mess, the complete invasion of your privacy." "I'd be more than okay with it. I'd be grateful for it." "The boys would want to paint their rooms, probably with dinosaurs or spaceships or something equally catastrophic for your interior design. Then we'll paint dinosaurs and spaceships." Carter's teething again. He cries in the middle of the night. "I'll take the night shift," Keston still wets the bed sometimes when he's stressed. We'll get waterproof mattress covers. Callan has strong opinions about breakfast foods and will only eat cereal that's shaped like cartoon characters. I'll buy stock in cartoon cereal companies. Despite her tears, Solène smiled. You have an answer for everything. Not everything. I don't know how to braid hair or remove crayon marks from walls, or explain why vegetables are important when pizza exists, but I'll learn. What about your work, your board meetings, your perfectly controlled schedule? I'll figure it out. People work from home all the time now, and maybe it's time I started prioritizing the things that actually matter. The silence stretched between them, full of possibility and fear. Okay, she whispered finally. Okay? Okay, we'll try it. Temporarily, until the apartment's fixed. And after it's fixed? After it's fixed, we'll see if you still want cartoon cereal for breakfast and dinosaur paintings on your walls. I will. You don't know that. Yes, I do. He brought her hand to his lips, kissing her fingers gently. Because home isn't a place, Solène, it's a feeling. And you and the boys are the first real home I've ever had. But neither of them realized that the hardest test of their new life together was still to come. Love isn't just about the beautiful moments. It's about choosing each other when everything falls apart. 3 weeks into their temporary arrangement, Darren's pristine penthouse had been transformed into something unrecognizable. Cartoon character magnets covered his stainless steel refrigerator. Colorful toy bins lined his minimalist living room. His dining table, once a showcase for expensive art books, now served as mission control for homework, craft projects, and elaborate Lego constructions. The morning everything changed started like any other. Darren was attempting to make pancakes, a skill he was still perfecting, while Solène got the boys ready for school. Carton sat in his high chair, systematically dropping pieces of banana on the floor while babbling his approval of the chaos around him. Uncle Darren, you burned them again, Keston observed, peering at the smoking pan. They're not burned, Darren protested. They're caramelized. That's a fancy word for burned, Callan added helpfully. Your Uncle Darren is still learning, Solène said, swooping in to salvage breakfast while simultaneously packing lunchboxes and locating Keston's missing homework folder. Watching her orchestrate the morning routine with ballet-like precision, Darren felt the familiar swell of admiration mixed with inadequacy. Even after 3 weeks, he still felt like he was playing catch-up in a game whose rules everyone else had mastered years ago. The call came while they were eating the successfully unburned second batch of pancakes. Mr. Holloway, his assistant Waverley's voice was tight with stress. We have a situation. Hartwell Industries is threatening to pull out of the merger. They want an emergency meeting this morning, and they specifically requested you be there in person. Darren's stomach dropped. The Hartwell merger was Emoticorp's biggest deal of the year. 6 months of negotiations that could collapse in a single meeting. When? He asked, already calculating travel time. 10:30. Their office is in Midtown. He looked at his watch. 8:45 a.m. Then he looked at Solène, who was trying to wrestle Carton into his jacket while listening to Keston's concerns about show and tell. I'll be there, he told Waverley, then hung up. Work crisis, Solène asked, reading his expression. Big one. I have to go. Of course you do. There was something in her tone, resignation mixed with disappointment, that made him pause. What's that supposed to mean? Nothing. Go save your company. Solène. Really, it's fine. I've got this. She gestured at the breakfast chaos, the lunch boxes, the inevitable morning meltdowns that came with getting 3 children ready for their day. I know you've got this. You always do. But I thought we were supposed to be doing this together now. We are, when you're here. The words stung because they were true. Despite his best intentions, work had been creeping back into their mornings, their evenings, their weekend plans. Emergency calls, urgent emails, meetings that couldn't wait. The demands of running a billion-dollar company didn't pause for domestic life, no matter how much he wanted them to. This is important, he said, hating how defensive he sounded. I know it is. Everything at your work is always important. That's not fair, isn't it? She turned to face him fully, and he could see the exhaustion he'd been too distracted to notice. When was the last time you read the boys a bedtime story without checking your phone? When was the last time we had dinner without you taking at least one call? I'm trying to balance. No, you're trying to have it all. The family, the empire, the perfect life where nothing has to be sacrificed. But that's not how it works, Darren. The boys had gone quiet, sensing the tension even if they didn't understand it. Carton stopped banging his spoon and looked between his mother and Darren with wide, worried eyes. We can't do this now, Darren said quietly, gesturing toward the children. When can we do it? Between your conference calls and board meetings? During the 5 minutes before you fall asleep checking stock prices? That's not... Mama? Keston's small voice cut through their argument. Are you and Uncle Darren fighting? Solane immediately shifted, kneeling down to his level. We're just having a grown-up conversation, baby. Sometimes adults need to talk about difficult things. Are you going to break up? Callan asked, with the directness that made adult conversations impossible around children. No one's breaking up, Darren said firmly. But even as he spoke the words, he could see doubt flickering in Solane's eyes. His phone rang again, waverly. I have to take this, he said apologetically. Of course you do. The meeting with Hartwell Industries was a disaster. Darren's mind was split between contract negotiations and the look on Solane's face when he'd left that morning. He missed crucial details, fumbled responses to important questions, and generally performed like someone whose attention was somewhere else entirely. Frankly, Mr. Holloway, Mr. Hartwell said during a break, you don't seem fully present today. This merger requires partners who are completely committed to the process. I am committed, Darren insisted, but the words felt hollow. By the time he returned to the penthouse that evening, the boys were already in bed and Solane was packing. What are you doing? The apartment's ready, she said, without looking up from the suitcase spread across his bed. The landlord called this afternoon. We can move back in tomorrow. But I thought we were going to see how this worked out. We did see. It doesn't work. Solane, please, let's talk about this. What's to talk about? You have a life, a very important, very demanding life, and I have mine. We tried to merge them and it's not sustainable. So we'll figure it out. I'll make changes. Like what? You'll sell your company? You'll stop being who you are? She finally looked at him and he could see she'd been crying. I won't ask you to do that, and I won't keep pretending it doesn't matter. It does matter. You matter. The boys matter. I know you think that. I even believe you mean it. But meaning it and living it are different things. From down the hall came the sound of Carton crying, not his usual sleepy fussing, but the distressed wail of a child who sensed something was wrong. I'll get him, Darren said, grateful for the excuse to escape the conversation. He found the toddler standing in his crib, tears streaming down his face, reaching through the bars toward the doorway. Hey, buddy, Darren whispered, lifting him up. What's wrong? Mama, Carton sobbed, pointing toward the living room. Mama's here. She's not going anywhere. But even as he said it, Darren knew it was a lie. She was going somewhere. They all were. Back to their small apartment, their separate life, their world that had briefly expanded to include him but was now contracting again. He sat in the rocking chair they'd bought for Carton's room, another sign of permanence that was about to become meaningless, and held the little boy until his sobs subsided into hiccups. I love you, buddy, he whispered into Carton's soft hair. I love all of you so much. When he returned to the bedroom, Solane was zipping up the last suitcase. Don't do this, he said quietly. Please, I have to. For them, for me, for you too, even if you don't see it yet. What am I supposed to do without you? The same thing you did before we met. Build your empire, change the world. Live your perfectly controlled life. I don't want that life anymore. Then change it. Really change it. Not just when it's convenient. Not just when there's no work crisis demanding your attention. Show me, show the boys, that we're your first priority, not your spare time hobby. How? I don't know, Darren. That's something you have to figure out yourself. She moved toward the door, then paused. The boys will ask about you. What should I tell them? Tell them, his voice broke. Tell them Uncle Darren loves them more than all the stars in the sky, and that sometimes grown-ups have to figure out how to be better before they can be the person their family deserves. And if you do figure it out, then I'll spend the rest of my life proving to you that you were worth every change, every sacrifice, every risk. Solane's composure finally cracked. Tears spilled down her cheeks as she looked at him one last time. I hope you do, Darren. I really hope you do. After they left, Darren stood in his penthouse, surrounded by the remnants of their brief life together. Cartoon magnets on the refrigerator, toy bins in the living room, a rocking chair in what had briefly been Carton's room. His phone buzzed with urgent emails, stock updates, meeting requests. The empire demanded his attention, as it always had. For the first time in his adult life, he ignored them all, because he finally understood that all the success in the world meant nothing if he had no one to share it with. 6 months later, The small crowd gathered outside PS 182 in the Bronx looked like any other group of parents waiting for dismissal. But Darren Holloway felt like he was about to make the most important presentation of his life. His hands were sweaty, his heart was racing, and he'd rehearsed his words so many times they'd started to lose meaning. "You sure about this?" asked Jamal, his new business partner and the former VP of technology at Emoticorp. "Because once you start down this path, there's no going back to the penthouse and the power suits." "I've never been more sure of anything," Darren replied, adjusting the hand-painted sign he held. The uneven letters, courtesy of his months of practice with children's art supplies, spelled out, "Keston, Callan and Carter's uncle, Darren loves you to the moon and back." The past 6 months had been the most challenging and transformative of his life. 3 days after Solène and the boys moved out, Darren had walked into Emoticorp's boardroom and announced his resignation as CEO. The board thought he'd suffered a breakdown. The media speculated about secret scandals. His former colleagues questioned his sanity. But Darren had never felt more sane. He'd sold his majority stake in the company, keeping just enough involvement to maintain financial security while stepping away from the relentless demands of running a tech empire. With Jamal's help, he'd started a smaller consulting firm focused on emotional wellness technologies for schools and community centers, work that felt meaningful in ways his corporate success never had. The penthouse was gone, replaced by a modest 3-bedroom house in Queens with a backyard, a treehouse and a kitchen designed for pancake disasters. He'd learned to grocery shop, to meal prep, to navigate the labyrinthine world of children's activities and school systems, but most importantly, he'd learned to wait. For 6 months, he'd respected Solène's space while proving through actions rather than words that his priorities had fundamentally shifted. He'd volunteered at the boys' school. He'd attended every soccer game, school play, and parent-teacher conference he was invited to, which initially was none. He'd shown up consistently, quietly, without grand gestures or demands for attention. Slowly, very slowly, trust had begun to rebuild. It started with brief conversations when he volunteered at school events. Then, Keston's teacher mentioned that Mr. Darren had donated new computers to the computer lab. Then Callan spotted him at a soccer game and waved enthusiastically before remembering he was supposed to be maintaining appropriate distance. Last week, Carter had run to him at the playground and refused to let go, crying, Uncle D, until Solène finally approached. "He's missed you," she'd said simply. "I've missed him too, all of them." "I know." That conversation had lasted less than 5 minutes, but it had given him hope that maybe, the door wasn't permanently closed. Now as children began streaming out of the school building, Darren spotted them immediately. Keston and Callan were walking together, backpacks dragging behind them, engaged in animated conversation about something incredibly important in the way that only 5-year-olds could manage. They saw him at the same moment. For a heartbeat, everyone froze. Then Callan broke into a run. "Uncle Darren!" The tackle hug nearly knocked him over. Keston was only seconds behind, throwing his arms around Darren's waist and holding on like he might disappear again. "You're here," Keston said, his voice muffled against Darren's shirt. "I'm here," Darren confirmed, kneeling down to their level. "I've missed you guys so much." "We missed you too," Callan said seriously. "Mama said you had to go away to learn how to be a better grown-up." "Did it work?" Keston asked with the directness Darren had missed desperately. "I hope so. What do you think?" Both boys studied his face with the intensity of master evaluators. "You look different," Keston observed. "Different how?" "Less busy. More here." "Yeah," Callan agreed. "Like you're really looking at us, not thinking about phone calls." Darren's throat tightened. "Children saw everything, missed nothing. I am really looking at you and thinking about how much I love you and how sorry I am that I ever made you feel like anything else was more important." "Are you going to live with us again?" Callan asked hopefully. "That's up to your mom, but I hope so." "She hopes so too," Keston said matter-of-factly. "She cries sometimes when she thinks we're not looking. Happy, sad tears, she calls them." It was then that Darren saw her. Solène emerged from the building carrying Carter, who had apparently fallen asleep during pickup. She looked tired but beautiful, wearing scrubs that suggested she'd come straight from her new job at the community health clinic. When she spotted the reunion happening on the sidewalk, her step faltered. Carter woke up at that moment, saw Darren, and immediately began reaching for him with grabby hands and excited babbling. "I think someone wants to say hello," Solène said softly, approaching slowly. "Hey, buddy," Darren whispered, as Carter launched himself into his arms. "I missed you too." For several minutes, they stood there in comfortable chaos. Two excited 5-year-olds chattering about everything that had happened in 6 months, a toddler refusing to let go of the uncle he'd missed, and two adults trying to navigate the complicated emotions of reunion. "Walk us home," Solène asked finally. "I'd love to." The apartment looked smaller than Darren remembered, but it was warm and lived in, and filled with the sounds of family. New artwork covered the refrigerator. A fort made from couch cushions dominated the living room. Carter's toys were scattered across the floor in the organized chaos that came with active children. "It's good," Darren said, looking around. "It feels like home." "It is home," Keston said importantly, "but it would be better if you lived here too." "Keston," Solène warned gently. "What?" "It's true. Tell him about the spare room, Mama." Solène flushed slightly. "There's a small room that I thought might, if you were interested." "Interested in what?" "Living here, with us. Really living here, not just visiting or temporary arrangements." She took a deep breath. "I've been thinking a lot about what you said, about being worth the changes, the sacrifices. And I realize that love isn't about one person changing for the other. It's about both people growing together." "Solène, I know you've changed your whole life. Left your company, moved to Queens, learned to make pancakes without burning them." "I still burn them sometimes," he admitted, "but you keep trying. And I think I'd like to try too. Try building something new together, something that works for all of us." Darren set Carter down carefully and moved closer to her. "What would that look like?" "I don't know exactly. But maybe it looks like a man who chooses his family over his phone calls, and a woman who chooses to trust that love can be permanent. Maybe it looks like 3 little boys who get to keep their Uncle Darren forever. Forever's a long time. Good thing I love you for the long haul." The kiss was soft, tentative at first, then deeper as 6 months of separation dissolved into the promise of reunion. Around them the boys cheered, Keston and Callan because they understood what was happening, Carter because everyone else seemed happy. "Does this mean you're gonna marry Mama?" Callan asked when they broke apart. "If she'll have me," Darren said, reaching into his pocket for the simple ring he'd been carrying for 3 months, waiting for the right moment. "Darren," Solène's eyes filled with tears, "I know it's not perfect timing. I know we still have things to figure out. But I also know that I want to spend the rest of my life making pancakes with you and reading bedtime stories and teaching these guys to drive and embarrassing them at their high school graduations. What about your old life, your empire?" "This is my empire," he said, gesturing around the small apartment. "You, them, this beautiful chaos we make together. Everything else is just work." "Are you sure?" "I've never been more sure of anything." "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, yes, I'll marry you. Yes, you can live here. Yes to all of it." The celebration that followed was loud and chaotic and perfect. Keston and Callan wanted to help plan the wedding immediately. Carter wanted to be carried while everyone danced around the living room, and Solène wanted to call her sister and her mother and anyone who would listen to tell them she was marrying the man who'd learned to choose love over everything else. Later that night, after the boys were asleep and the excitement had settled into contentment, Darren and Solène sat on the couch planning their future. "No big wedding," she said firmly. "Something small, just family and close friends. Whatever you want. And we're keeping this apartment until we're sure about everything. Whatever makes you feel safe. And you have to promise me something. Anything. Promise me that if work ever starts feeling more important than this again, you'll tell me. Promise we'll figure it out together instead of letting it tear us apart." "I promise." "Good." She settled against his shoulder, her ring catching the lamplight. "Because I love you, Darren Holloway. The real you, the one who makes terrible pancakes and cries at children's movies, and somehow learned to love 3 little boys who aren't even his." "They are mine," he said fiercely. "Maybe not by blood, but in every way that matters. And I love them, all of you, more than I ever thought possible. Even when we're loud and messy and completely chaotic, especially then." Outside, Queens settled into evening quiet. Inside apartment 4B, a family that had been broken was whole again, and Darren Holloway, former tech mogul and current maker of imperfect pancakes, finally understood what home really meant. It wasn't a place. It wasn't success or money or recognition. It was this. The woman sleeping against his shoulder, the sound of children breathing safely in the next room, and the knowledge that tomorrow he'd wake up surrounded by the people who mattered most. He was exactly where he belonged. Have you ever found yourself so successful on the outside, yet completely empty on the inside? What would you do if a stranger accidentally left behind the only clues to a life filled with real emotions you've forgotten how to feel? Your participation in this channel is very important. Please leave your opinion in the comments. Thank you so much for watching until the end. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, leave a like, and comment your thoughts. Your participation is very important to us. See you next time.